welcome everybody. We may have a few more, we don't know. But I just thought I'd introduce Bill Agee, who I met many, many years ago when he was curator at the Whitney. And we went for a memorable, or immemorable, visit to Ilya Volotovsky's studio, where our hosts insisted that we start off the afternoon with something called pepper vodka. And one pepper vodka led to a second at his insistence, and gradually geometric painting turned into biomorphic. Anyway, then Bill went on to Pasadena, where he was director, and then Houston, and then back to New York to Hunter and writing books. This is his most recent. And Stuart Davis show, Morgan Russell, then Donald Judd. Anyway, and he's now retired, so we hooked him to be part of the second conversation we've had. And now Brian will introduce Carolyn and Kate.
My name is Brian Washburn, and I grew up with Carolyn over many years, from the age of probably 5, on the beaches of Long Island, in East Hampton during our summers out there. There are a number of artists and writers that we all converged at a beach called Indian Wells, and we all grew up together, swimming while our parents drank cheap beer, and argued and shocked over the art world and the political scenes of the day. It's been marvelous to grow up with these two women and share their father's work posthumously. We never, as children, were never really involved in our parents' work. We always experienced the results of openings of their parents' at the Elaine Benson Gallery, but as I'm sure Eva, your mother, described, most of us were mounted on a piece of sculpture outside of Elaine Benson's studio, twirling around forever and ever for about an hour and a half, and then we all packed off and went back home. But anyway, it's been an experience presenting Ray's work again to everyone. His joyous use of color, his absolute conviction to their compositions. They're very brave and vulnerable paintings. Anyway, thank you. And, onward, guys. You're up.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Jim.
Yeah, thank you, Jim.
Oh,
And what can I just say, thank you for the show. It's so beautiful. It's more than I even expected, so thank you for that.
you're welcome. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, it's a beautiful show, and it just reaffirms for me Ray's real achievement as an artist and his importance as an artist. I still hope that somehow we will get a museum show done, but in the meantime, this is a great experience. So, I'd like to ask you both. Well, tell us something about your dad. I think you all know Ray's work, obviously, but tell us about your memories of Ray as a painter. How old were you when you first were aware of the fact that he was really an important artist. And what was that like for you?
You know, I think for us, his art was always a part of our lives.
Yeah.
It was something that, you know, in East Hampton, in the country, he had the barn where he painted every day. At the village here, he would go walk across Prince Street to the studio every day, or go to Hunter College to teach. And so we're always aware that that the work was primary, was very important in his life. And in fact, I have that story from when I was a kid at PS 41, and they had said, they had us, I think I was only like 5. Could I have been like 5 or 6 years old?
Yeah, possibly, yeah.
Probably 6 years. And they had us paint little pictures of what do your parents do? And I drew this, I drew this little picture of you know, what was like a wall and a little paintbrush. My father makes paintings and makes the family money.
No, I think that's right. It was no. I don't even think he said paintings. I think it was just a picture of someone painting with a brush and saying, "My father makes my family money."
Right.
The paintbrush was very much there. But, exactly.
But yeah, we were always.
No, we were always around. We always went to the openings.
Yes.
We were always running. Fishback. Oh my God! There was a great place to climb where they stored other people's paintings. And Caroline and I would get back there, and it was really probably not a good situation. And I remember going to the studio very young and being told, no matter what you do, there was a big palette table, and it had all these different colors all over it. It was just, you know, and as a young child, it was, and they were glistening. And my father said, "Don't you touch that." No, you know, it was like he was serious. And, but when he walked out of the room, I was young enough that I just could not resist, you know. So I remember the smell of turpentine, and he come with a thing, scrubbing my hands, all the paint that I had gotten all over my hands, all the different colors, and that smell of turpentine still brings me right back to like that moment, and him just, "I told you not to touch me," you know. Oh, he was so mad. Anyway, yeah, I was always aware that would
I
happen.
remember one time I went to pick Dad up at the studio, and one of his students from Hunter had brought their work over to have him speak analyze. And it was so marvelous. I sat in the back with a big work table that he had. I sat back there quietly while he critiqued this work, and his insights were so thoughtful.
And it was very gentle
Very gentle,
with the students.
very precise, and it was so satisfying because he was never my teacher. And I never really had that opportunity to hear him speak to his students, and I'll never forget it because it was very inspiring to know that he was such a wonderful instructor.
Do you remember if your dad ever talked about his childhood? When we spoke with Andrew Bolotowski last time, I was just curious about Bolotowski's early times in Russia, because no one had ever worked on it.
never heard it.
And he came forth with so much material on Bolotowski's days in Russia. So I'm wondering if you remember anything that he might have said about that he was born in Beresford, South Dakota. And then
That's Russia.
That's important. It must be, it's cold. And then he went to the University of Minnesota, right? And he studied there. And then he went to the master's program at the University of Iowa, or was it the other way
It was
around?
Iowa.
Iowa, yeah.
Yeah.
University of Iowa,
Uh-huh. Yes, it's Iowa.
in Iowa City, yeah.
Yeah.
Did he ever speak much about that, or is there anything you remember, or as the more I go along, the more I see so much comes out of really early days.
I would say that, I know that grandparents were very poor.
His parents were very
Mhm.
poor, all right.
Yeah, yes.
Well, this is,
And-
what did his father do?
He had a number of different jobs, and he went from, Kate, do you remember any of the specifics?
No,
He,
it's one of the things Dad really never spoke.
he did talk that much
About his early life.
He did? He
He
did.
didn't. No, I mean, it's actually, I'm now just starting to do a little archival work on our family, just going through old photographs and things. But he did not speak about anything really before he came to New York, to me anyway. I mean, he would sometimes talk about climbing water towers,
Right.
something like that, as a young person. He was a daredevil.
He was a renegade.
And he would ride on trains, just take off and ride on trains,
Jump on those
going across the countryside. But he didn't speak in terms of,
freight cars.
and I know that I remember he talked once about it, and I've read about it too, that listening to, as a young person, he was sitting at a soda counter, and they were playing the radio, and he heard Count Basie.
But what about music?
And he said that was the first time he'd ever heard jazz, and he said it blew me away. And it was something kind of he started playing music, and jazz always became a part of his life. And he played the trumpet, and he was.
Oh, he did play the trumpet?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, there was a period of time when Dad was trying to figure out, he had a band, and they played around, and there was a period of time when he was trying to decide whether to become a jazz musician or an artist. And he eventually decided on the latter because he could do it by himself. He didn't have to rely on anybody else.
Sure.
So, but of course, as we know, jazz definitely was a
Yeah.
Yeah,
very, very important, inspiring
yeah.
throughout his life to his work.
Did he,
Improvisation,
do you remember if he had music on while he was painting?
sometimes.
Sometimes.
Yes, he would
That's
definitely.
Sometimes, but he talks, I was reading, actually, I think it was the conversation with Doug Olson, that they talk about when the action of painting itself, nothing else is really involved. He said, you go, you're in it, and you're not thinking about, he says, you're not thinking about women, you're not thinking about the baseball game, you're not thinking about, and Doug was like, yeah, and you're in it until you're not in painting is complete or you fall out of it.
He called it a trance-like state.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in terms of listening to jazz while he was painting, I'm sure that there were times that he did, but I don't think it was like a requiem. I don't think he did it as a total practice, But it was very important to him. And I know there was a painting that he did, and it was called, who was it? Was it Stan Getz that had did that song called Parker 51? That's what it was.
Yes, I think so.
And Stan Getz was a very good friend of my father's. And he wrote a song about one of Dad's paintings. And the name of the song was Parker 51. This was obviously way back in the day. And after it was released, Stan got a beautiful package of Parker pens Parker Pens had thought he wrote the song about one of their pens
Oh,
and sent him a whole collection of that series from that year. Anyway, it was always a good joke. Good for a laugh that Parker Pens sent him this thing.
Yeah.
But,
Dad had a lot of musicians. Don Cherry was a close friend. And he, of course, had met Miles Davis a couple of times. I remember Dad had said that when he met Miles, it was backstage. Remember at one of the downtown, and he was saying, Sim was saying, well, here's the charts, and he was, and Miles, charts, I don't need any charts.
right.
Just to follow up on this a little bit, did he talk much about his time at Iowa? There were very good paintings coming out of there, the so-called stroke paintings.
Right.
Okay, and they're really good.
I think it was there that he met Kyle Morse. Right, Caroline?
Yes, that's what I think.
And Kyle had, of course, yeah, his work, and they both ended up, of course, in New York City. But he didn't speak, I mean, I've seen some of the work from like 1949,
Yeah.
but that's as early as, and he didn't really speak of it very often. I mean, by the time that he and I ever had any dialogue about paintings, it was really about, what we're looking at here.
It's interesting now because the University of Iowa was once a hotbed of modernism. We think of Iowa as corn-fed American regionalism, but the Iowa Writers' Workshop, for example, is well known. The Museum of the Fine Arts program was really a force for more progressive and advanced art. And there's a good book for somebody, maybe it's probably been written, but that was, I'm sure that must have been important to Ray it helped to make some very good paintings, but then he comes to New York, and that's so much the story of American art. The talent is grown out in the Midwest, and it comes to New York. No, and it's a great American story, at least in my mind, that provincial, and I mean that in the best sense.
Yes.
They're not of the capital. It doesn't mean they're less advanced or anything, but they come to the capital, to New York, to better themselves. And he, of course, Ray is part of the generation born in 1922 that follows up on the first real flowering second of American talent. And it's the influx of talent into New York in those days is still amazing. Do you ever remember, you never say anything about the University of Minnesota that you could, yeah. All right. Well, that's interesting. Do you have some, do you remember anything really pithy or memorable about what he said about any of his paintings that we don't have, well, whether or not, that we don't really know about?
It's funny, I was looking at this, remember this, of course, was the
Oh, yeah.
catalog from
Yeah.
one of the first, was it this one? That was one of the
That's
first
the
shows
show,
that
yeah.
we worked on.
That was the Hunter Show.
Yes, that's right, but there's also this Haggerty, and I was looking at,
Oh, yeah,
just the
that's
other
the-
day, this was a show at the Haggerty Museum in Milwaukee, and it was such a fantastic overview of all of Dad's periods. But it's interesting, there's some drawings, early drawings that we had represented. I noticed that there's this quote of Dad writing about, I think it's one of the first times he wrote anything down about the simple paintings. He says, areas of color are more important than the shape. And the shape ought to just be a resultant. And it was just, to me, an interesting, he's trying to work out in these little sketches, this probably before he even started working on these big paintings.
That's very interesting, Karen. I'm glad you pointed that out. It's part of his work that part of the practice of a lot of artists at that time and then subsequently is that we basically working out of the materials. There are no preordained plans, no preordained drawings. There are no preliminary drawings. He puts down some color and begins to work with it. And in the process of working with it and layering it, and if you look closely, this gets overlooked. I think I've overlooked it somewhat, is that, say, in the painting in the middle here, if you look at those colors, you see how he's been working it, and it really looks like he was using his hands. And the shape emerges from that process of working, right?
Very much so.
And it's a kind of evolutionary process that things result from that working.
Yeah, he says, I'm sorry, but I didn't mean to interrupt, but he says right here, the color was often achieved through direct mixing on the canvas rather than on a palette. So the canvas becomes the palette, basically. And it gets to various densities of fully or incompletely mixed pigments, and they come together eventually.
Yeah, and that makes sense with the fact that he never designated the edge until later, right? I mean, it's like working out, finding the color, the right value, hue, and weight, and then finding that edge at a later date.
You haven't mentioned the stroke paint.
Well,
They come.
we did a little
Yep,
bit.
they sure do.
The stroke paintings, you don't, they're really good paintings. We don't know much about them, we don't see them, but they're came out of a kind of cubist grid, I think, is our
Yeah.
They're kind of Cezanne-esque, I think, in those,
Right.
Yeah.
there's lots of color, and you can see a connection, I think, with the larger shape.
Right,
Wasn't it Ed Reinhardt that-
Roland Crampton, I think,
Yeah.
who had been at Dad's studio and looking at those stroke paintings, which of course are a number of
Yeah, they have all
different
the different
colors.
colors.
And he walked up to the painting and he held his fingers and he said,
Yeah.
wouldn't this make a beautiful picture?
Right, so it's just like two.
Basically holding two shapes, and Dad always said that was,
Yeah.
not only did it anticipate what was going to happen with Dad's work, but it actually anticipated a lot of what was going to happen in color field painting after that point.
Yeah.
He did a show of those stroke paintings.
That's right.
Yeah, there's a catalog of them.
Yeah.
It's that process of clarification,
Yes.
amplification and clarification is really so much a part of the modernist drive. And it's now, I've been, for the last 6 months or so, I've really been gotten interested in working on Albert Pinker writing. And the process is what Roger did. He worked and worked, and I think he really began this process of working out of the materials, putting material down and working at it and see where it took you. And what Roger does, he talks about how one day he forgot detail. He let it go. He couldn't get it. Instead, he just took out put down directly slabs of paint and then worked it with the palette knife. And that's really start of a modernist process.
Very much so.
But these, you can see that, say the painting in the back or here again, you see how again he's working the painting.
Yeah, he talked about wanting to let color tell the whole story.
Yeah, and let it come it's active, it's not a hard edge, he's not a hard edge painter,
No.
for sure, right?
No, the hand is there.
And the hand is there, and and that's one of the beautiful things about it. When you look, and you kind of get caught up in that rhythm,
I think,
body and moving and.
yes, very much so. And I think that's what makes him so strong and alive, is that he is searching. He is on a quest. He's looking to find a balance. And I think that's oftentimes why the changes in the color, when you see that there's one color underneath another, oftentimes, like the violet, you can see how there was a deeper color underneath, and he worked it out until it became a little bit lighter. And he's searching for the right balance.
Yeah.
Searching, sense of search, which is appropriate. Groping, as Bill Jensen used to say. And looking for something, and it reminds you, actually, remind me of Baudelaire's, one of his definitions of modern art, the search for the ephemeral, the fugitive, maybe the unstable, and which is, of course, really part of the modern condition. And but they won't sit still.
No,
I mean, they're
they move.
monumental, but they won't sit there. You know, it's just, you get a little twitchy looking at it.
I know.
You see the one behind you.
I was just going to say, you and I talked about this painting, Bill, because you're saying it's such an unusual composition. And if the yellow, if that were any darker, the whole thing would kind of topple over. It has to
Yeah,
be
but
this
it's
color.
light and it's open.
And somehow
right,
balances
exactly.
and stays.
And it's, you kind of want to
Buoyant.
close your back. So it's just this layering of color, and then the edging. The edging it's kind of nervous. And, it's, again, looking for something, but it keeps it so active. And then, if you look at some of the paintings, there's clear spacing between the shapes,
Yes.
but in others, it's kind of moving in, and it's maybe gonna touch, and then it pulls back,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
you see that over here. And it's really, it is like what Rothko said about his paintings, that his shapes were like actors in a drama.
Yes.
Moving about, and I think that, I have very much that feel. Yeah.
It's interesting, Kate and I were talking recently. You remember, Kate, how Dad, there were a couple of paintings where Dad worked on one form, and it was just one large, or remember the triptych, I think there's a photograph of the
Yeah,
triptych
there's
here,
also
which
one
were
here.
also
Or
No.
Katie, right?
individual.
Yeah.
The
Got that one
triptych
too.
You see this?
is marvelous.
One singular.
Yes.
And this is the triptych here.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Painting.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
I don't remember
Yeah,
that. Remember that.
Yeah, that's in the
That's,
book.
yes. It's a
Yeah.
Oh,
very,
that's it. We put that in the book. That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
those are characters, as somebody said to you, Bill, waiting for Godot.
No, wait for the
I'm kind of anxious, and, they say
Very much at that time too, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yes.
50s.
iconic 50s, waiting for Godot and Beckett. They say at the end, shall we go? Yes, let's go. And nobody moves.
I like the painting, right?
And that's it. Yeah.
You know, it's interesting, you and I were saying the other day, Kate, there was that very large, that Mom loved so much, that one gray shape, that was so big, it was all just one huge form. I don't know how big it was, so
It's
none of them are much bigger than
huge.
6 or 7.
Huge.
In any case, I thought it was interesting, because we do know that that painting was ruined in a flood.
Yeah.
And Mom was heartbroken because she loved this beautiful big form. And Dad consequently tried to repaint this picture. And I never really thought about it before. We
But he
have
wasn't
this
successful
at the studio,
Yeah.
but I never really put it together. together in my mind, but I think about it recently, that it was not a success. That big gray shape does not work. When you put it up on the wall, it just is.
It was, you couldn't redo it,
You
yeah.
couldn't, and it really does tell us that it is in the process of the search that we're talking about here.
Yeah.
That brings
When
the
you have
vibrancy.
that idea of something that you want to fill,
Right.
it's not what
It's
it's doing.
that one beautiful time that he did that, and he couldn't recreate it.
Yeah.
That's just not what he's doing.
It sort of maybe relates to what Nolan called, and Lewis called one-shot paintings. You try to get it down as
Yeah.
fast as you can, and it's either right or it's
It's
wrong.
wrong.
But you, and the whole thing, as Ray said, the whole painting may be in error, but never just a part.
Right.
That's right.
And
Yeah,
it's,
it actually says that, yeah, when he's talking to
Yeah.
Doug.
That's right. And he was one to definitely, you know, at the end of the day, if he thought it wasn't working and there was nowhere he was going to go with it, he'd tear it up. He was very
Yeah,
adamant about editing his work, and if it wasn't
that's
where he wanted to
interesting.
go.
He-
doing it.
yeah.
Yeah.
There's, in fact, in Cadmium Yellow, there's a
Right.
scene of him, and you just hear this, and he's tearing this big
Yes,
canvas
yes,
into,
yes.
it's shredding it, and then rolling it up, and then next shot you see him going on Prince Street and going in the garbage
Big
and
dumpster.
dumping it into the garbage.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's, again, once he got it down, there was really no correction. You might work it a little bit, but you couldn't correct something.
Yeah, no, he says also, there are no mistakes in my work, which doesn't sound exactly, but I know that's what he's talking about.
They are.
Well, yeah, and he never relied on accident. And he felt that there were certain painters that he knew that would accept accident as part of their work, but Dad never did. He believed in potential.
Yeah, intent.
It doesn't, I think you should also explain that they're equally successful. Remember our first exhibition, you brought in those small paintings on canvas that
Yes.
you found. And so it doesn't have to be on the scale to work.
Oh, yeah,
And that's very difficult.
yeah.
to do.
There are, yeah, there's one of them, small painting in the window.
Yeah, but the ones that they found were this size.
Yeah, like
The
little
first
gems.
show was
Yeah, yeah,
the small, you have the cover of the catalog.
Yes.
Is that,
That's
I have
it.
it right
Oh,
here.
this one,
yeah.
Yeah.
I am happy owner of this painting now, and it's no more than 12 inches square.
You have that one?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so good. I like it. I love that painting.
And it's, I just love this picture,
Nice.
and it's small, but you can see it 50 feet away.
The size is in there.
It's monumental even
Yeah,
though
it's
it's
a monumental.
small.
It tells us the difference. This is really a good painting that can tell us the difference between size and scale. Okay, and these are large paintings, but they also have a wonderful large and generous internal scale. That is the way the shapes relate to each other and also then to the edges of the canvas. So it's really, there's a generosity of spirit within them. And but in here, they're monumental, but this is monumental too.
Yeah.
I mean, you would never, looking at this, never know it was only 12 inches square. And that's so important. It's wonderful. And then you look what he does here. You see a fairly wide range of colors, but they're all. But this one he's just using various gradations of a rip, right? But they're all different, and they all play against each other. Yeah. I mean, this guy is a really good painter. And they just keep giving and giving and giving. You know, it's, and it's the hand, finally, it's the hand. The touch, the human hand and the touch. Tell us the funniest incident about your father and his painting.
Oh,
Or just a funny incident.
I don't know.
He had a good sense of humor. I mean,
Yes, he did, and he didn't take himself too seriously. I mean, he took art seriously, but he didn't take himself too seriously. I mean,
Oh, they're the stroke.
yeah, those are the
Yeah,
sort of things,
that's
you don't rub that out.
Stroke paintings, you see. And there's kind of the cutest armature in here, but you can, there are these, the shapes are there, but that's,
Yeah.
yeah.
But if,
They're single, isolated
yeah, if you take
shapes.
like a little piece of that, you almost see a
Just took it
simple,
out, yeah.
simple painting pattern out of it, which is, I think, exactly what Andrew was talking about.
Everyone and everything comes from somewhere. It doesn't just happen.
Jay, you and I just read that. What is that? We know Dad denied any recognizable imagery.
Oh, right.
And there's that story that you tell about, that's funny.
About Franz Klein?
Yes.
What?
But I told this, Joan, you'll remember, I told this 2 years ago, but I found the piece that has the ending to the story. So the story is, and I'll actually, you know what, I'll just read it, it's okay with it, because it's about content and about the idea of artists not wanting to see anything recognizable in their work. So you used to tell, it says, Franz Klein told me once about working for a long time, as he did, toward the conclusion of a painting, which he did. A friend then walked into the studio and said to Franz, "What about that boot there, in the middle of the painting?" And then Franz saw the form, as one sees in the map of Italy, a boot. You painters know that if someone sees in your painting something or some aspect of it that you did not see, and if it is unwanted, the experience is dismaying. Franz was somewhat upset. He said that although himself was then, from then on, stuck on seeing this boot, when he looked at the painting, he did not try to remedy the matter by repainting it. He just let the boot stay there. So, but it was funny because when I told that story 2 years ago, everyone said, "Well, what happened to the painting? Did he repaint it?" And I didn't know the answer, but now we have the answer. I found it. He left, the boot is still there. So that's it. But he was very dismayed about it.
You know, I've never seen any recognizable images, but it's the way abstract art works, is kind of metaphors, forms of metaphors for it. And, you know, as Rothko said, I mean, I feel there's a human presence to many of these shapes. I mean, the vertical shapes especially. I kind of see that over here as a family unit. I mean, I see, you know,
And the
I mean,
post and lintel of the three.
the what?
The post and lintel shape sometimes of three
Yeah.
together.
Yeah, three, but we kind of had, I also thinking about South Dakota, and Minnesota. If you look at early Clifford Still paintings, he grew up there, and there are often these vast spaces of skies. I mean, it's what you experience. And I sort of see these as isolated humans out on that prairie. It's me. I mean, and but there is that wide open, there's a wide open sense of space in these. It's so often American art relates to the space of the continent.
Yeah, I remember there was those photographs of Dad in that article, Parker Paints a Picture. And so in that huge studio, and he had this massive board that time from what it physically was. Must have been some
It
kind
was
of.
a sliding, yeah, it was like a sliding.
Right, and he would put such a huge piece of canvas on it. You know, he needed, and he would face it so there was natural light.
Yeah,
A photograph of him
yeah.
working
starting
on
work.
this huge piece.
Right, and then it was only later that he would cut the canvas down to what he thought was.
Right, I think that has to do with moving to one-on-one prints as opposed to being in that larger. Speaking of Clifford Still, actually, they were
That was
in
his
Clifford
studio.
Still studio
Yeah.
on Broadway.
Schools,
Right, yeah.
Yeah, it was, the studio was painted, it was all black.
Yeah, they moved into the studio and
Clifford Still had painted the whole thing pitch black.
It was black and there were big, huge curtains, there were huge ceilings and big curtains over all the windows. Oh my
Well,
goodness. And that's where that
it's
photograph.
interesting, the idea of cutting down the canvas after we would paint.
Yeah,
It's all part of that sense of process.
yeah,
uh,
yeah.
Discovery of the art as you went along. And that, working out of the materials, that goes back to something Alfred Stieglitz worked out of his materials in the early 20th century. He'd start taking photographs and then find the art in it. And that becomes a fairly standard practice that you paint and then you find the picture. And you can crop or cut as you need.
Yeah.
The point is, it's not predetermined.
Exactly, like he said in the report on the sketch when he's trying to find what it is he's doing, which is it's coming from within color, and that color is first and foremost, and then once it found the shape and it seems to hold it
Right,
in a way that makes sense, then the edge can
right, and it has nothing to do,
define.
and
Yeah, it just doesn't do with the
it
edge.
has nothing to
per
do
se.
with design
Right.
It's not designed.
at all. It's
Yes.
just that to get away from design, you know, and it's not like you have a vessel that you're filling, it's just something that comes organically, and the colors are organic. And it talks about that in depth in the content piece, and also there's a piece that he wrote for a show at the Tate Gallery,
Oh, yeah.
which I think you know that piece. But it's about the color emerging.
It all emerges.
Mhm.
You know, that's one of the things when we haven't talked about this is just how great a colorist Ray is. I mean, the pure brilliance and intensity and fullness of these colors. I mean, we don't think of them. At least I haven't really as a color field artist, but that's what they are.
Right.
Certainly looked at in the sense of color field painting as a whole, not the specific Greenbergian interpretation of staining directly, but in color as fields of colors, not just Matisse. And,
Right.
and then there's a kind of generosity of spirit. The color is, it's full, it's ample, it's no holding back. Look at,
Yeah. We were all
Yeah, we're talking
about that reading this, but we had talked about that quote.
when he's talking about color, and he says here, he says, Alfred Wilkie and I had this discussion in which we decided that all reds go together. More recently, he said in a letter to me that he decided that all colors go together, which I very much agree with. And I've thought so for a long time now. It doesn't make a bit of difference whether it's green or purple. If a painting looks good after you've made it, then it's good. And not because the combinations Albert's thought about, for instance. But it's interesting because that really talks to not just all colors within one painting, but all colors within one room.
And you're
You know? Exactly. That's what I was thinking
There's
about.
the green and the purple.
Right, and then you've got your green and your purple over there
Yeah.
hanging out together.
Right, and isn't it true that Rothko always sought opportunities to show his work as many you know, the works
Yes.
together.
He wants to show things together, right?
Because
Because
they
of
work.
players.
The dialogue off of each other, so
Yeah.
it's so.
Opinions interact. That idea reverses like 300 years of standard color theory. Where, I mean, Goethe and all the color theorists had very strict ideas about the harmony by analogy, and how certain colors, if they're too close together, wouldn't work. I mean, it's all worked out in the massive literature.
Right,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
So,
I know.
You know, there is a story about how they used to have these great parties, the artists, you know, they would have their panels, and then we would pitch in to buy a couple bottles of food, and we would have these great parties, and Philip de Villa was one of the great chroniclers of all things that people were talking about in the art world and everything, and he said he overheard Bill de Kooning at one of these parties, and they got into quite a heated argument. It was a discussion, I'll say. Bill and Franz Klein were talking about hot and cold. Hot versus cold. And Philip de Villa's thoughts said, oh, see what these artists are talking about, you know, hot versus cold. And he got in there, he got his ear in the conversation, and it turned out they were talking about plumbing. Not color, because every artist back then did their own plumbing. And they were having an argument about how to do the plumbing, and except that it wasn't nothing to do with hot colors, cold colors. So,
you know, this, I'm sure, maybe there's some questions out there.
I was just gonna say,
I have a question.
hot or cold pen?
Yeah, Holly?
What kind of books did he read? Did he love to read?
Oh, and
terrible.
Merrill, that's right, he did read a lot of mysteries.
Yeah.
It's true, he read everything. He read everything. He read the New Yorker religiously. He
Did he
read,
really?
Oh, yeah, New Yorker.
Yes,
All the time.
all the time. Books he read.
He read everything, he listened to everything.
Artists
He
used
was-
to trade books, detective stories.
Yes.
I bet they did,
Yeah.
I'm sure. I mean,
I know some of Bill Cooney's titles are based on detective stories,
really?
and some of Elaine's.
Yeah.
Detectives.
Yeah, Death in the Back Room or something like that. Right.
Yes, I have a question. Just so that I think, I'm studying Japanese. And when they teach you how to write, because you don't use a certain one, two, you don't just take a letter and just write it in. You have to do it this way, and this, and start. So when I'm looking at this painting, I'm thinking to myself, did he start out with the blue and then put the two reds, or did he? How did he start?
That's a good
That's a
question.
good question.
I have no
I have no
idea.
idea either.
And then also the other thing I'm thinking is that didn't he do a little sketch first on the side?
No,
And so-
no sketches.
He just looked at the
Well,
canvas and said,
that's
I'm
not
going to put
quite
red
true.
or
He
something.
does a couple sketches, but that's
Early,
just only,
yeah.
not really as a preliminary to anything
Yeah.
specific in the
Early
painting,
on.
but he
Early
talks.
on,
Yeah.
we showed them
Yes,
earlier.
oh, sorry.
There was some, but as a matter of practice, as I understand it, no sketches.
Not at all, yeah.
He hits the canvas a la prima. I mean, there's good preparation, but no sketches.
No sketches.
Yeah.
And so it's just a visceral thing.
Yeah.
It's all visceral. And then, how did he know when it was visceral with it when he stopped? Like, there's a space there. He could have put something in there, but he didn't. That's it. He stopped. That was it. Or did he go for lunch and forgot or something?
Well,
No,
that's
I don't think,
No, that is
That's
it.
white
I mean,
space.
That's a very,
one
that's a
of the
very key point.
one of the big questions.
Yes.
How to.
It is, well, especially back in the 50s, was how do you know when a picture is finished?
Yeah,
That's
right.
And I still ask younger artists
And they don't know.
that, and they get answers all over the place. And the answers of the ABX group have been documented. But some of them, Adolf Gottlieb wisecracks, and what my wife usually tells me. and other guys went into these long existential, what is my soul feel empty and all this stuff. And so it's a big issue. I mean, that's part of the whole modern search for something we don't know what. I mean, back to Albert Ryder, you talk about fulfilling his dreams, and he paints these dream-like pictures. But what was the dream? I'm still trying to figure that out. I mean, if we say to each other, I'm chasing the dream, well, what are you chasing? Do you know? And usually, as Melville and the great Gatsby said, the dream is long past, you missed it, pal. And so, anyway, it's the sense of the contingent, the unfinished,
Right.
which,
Was he an alcoholic? I heard that he was an alcoholic.
Yes,
yes,
Big alcoholic.
yes.
Right.
Among many.
Oh, no, I'm not
No,
saying that's the only
yeah.
one, but I was going to buy a grave marker once, many years ago, and this is foolish, but there was someone sitting beside me, and they said, oh, don't buy him, he was an alcoholic.
what did one have to do with the
I know,
other?
well, exactly, but
Yeah.
I've never found that column.
It'd be a very small collection.
Right. Yeah, but I don't see it in his painting.
No, you
No.
wouldn't.
So you wonder, it's interesting, right? I mean,
You know, he didn't,
he didn't
as
dream
far as
while
I.
he was painting, or,
No, as far as I know, he'd go in the morning and work all day.
I mean, yeah, quite weird.
Yeah, great noise. What were his working practice? I mean, would he work all day?
Early and work all day, and
And
then
all
come
day.
home at night. Yes, or go to the market.
Vanilla.
Go to finales, yeah.
Right. So very much, and daily, unless he was teaching.
And somebody threw meat over the transom to keep him painting, or what?
What is that?
Did someone throw the food over the transom so he would just keep on painting, or what?
You know, he would bring his lunch and he'd make his breakfast, and he'd bring his lunch, and he'd work throughout, and then
He's
leave for
disciplined.
the day. Yes.
Every day,
Very,
get up
very
and
much
go to
so.
the gallery.
Very.
That's very good, you still have to do that.
Yeah.
Now,
Very
did
much.
he ever throw anything away? Did he ever say, no,
Yes,
this doesn't work?
Yeah,
He
yeah,
definitely
a
did.
lot.
He did.
Yeah, a lot.
Very often.
In fact, Caroline and I, not long after he passed, were working at the studio, and we came upon a roll on it said destroy.
And did you destroy it?
Yes.
Are you
Yeah.
his daughters?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't.
No, it's okay.
I'm looking to see if the two of you looked alike, sort of.
But, yeah, so he destroyed anything that he didn't thought worked, you
And
know.
did he ever paint you?
No.
He did never paint you.
He was never a figurative painter.
I've seen
Early
things-
on.
Earlier.
Early, I've seen, and once, I saw him, he painted a geranium once. Remember that? It was really good. I was shocked. I was like, oh my God. It was just such a fabulous drawing. And, but it was the only thing I ever saw that he did from my to like
Yeah.
a.
I mean, it's interesting, in one of these catalogs, we have even early on, Dad was an excellent draftsman. And in his art history classes, and I think this is before he even decided to become an artist, he was his sketches are amazing. And we have some of them documented here.
Yeah.
See, he did already have this amazing hand, but being a very good draftsman was, as he could be, essential. And he drew a lot.
Are either of you painting?
I painted for many years.
Did you?
Yes, yes.
To tell, I'm not sure is inherent.
What caused him to move away from this form of abstract sort of colorism?
Yeah, I think he felt like he had done it
So
and wanted
he
to
wanted
kind
to
of.
change?
He had no longer felt this this sense that drawing was corny, and he started moving into working with drawn line again. It's interesting you ask that, because he eventually developed a technique of drawing straight from the tube. And he would make these amazing large forms of color and then kind of accent and work with them with these beautiful lines of color.
Yeah.
So that he kind of no longer felt that the drawing was corny.
Yeah, so actually there's a well-known quote about saying that he finally got over the idea that drawing was corny. And he also talks about the curvilinears, like these ones on the cover of the Haggerty one, or these, Joan, remember these curvilinears?
Yeah.
Which so these follow the simple paintings where he really starts to move.
Don't forget that
He really starts to move.
that curious series called The Nine, which followed
That's right, that's the nines
the
too.
nines. I'll check that out.
I think I have it right here.
It's interesting, kind of might look at
Yeah,
that.
indeed.
Yeah, that was a great show.
And it shows that this one, oh yeah, this was wonderful.
But only for a year and a half did he,
That's right.
Yeah,
he stopped doing it.
Again, he moved on. I mean,
Yeah.
that was one of the strengths
That
I
was-
always thought of his work, is that he was courageous, and he was
yeah, he kept doing
willing to
different things.
move on to something else.
Well, he
I
was
think
expressing-
that goes back to how, you know, how, when's the painting finished? When did he know it was time to move on? You know, I mean, it's like, yeah. Yeah, I mean, these are just so wonderful to be around. I mean, they're just almost spiritual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What other artists did he really look up to of his generation? Did he talk about or have dialogues with people? I remember always seeing him talking to artists.
Always,
Yeah.
always. He talked to everybody. I mean, of course, Bill DeCooning, Ad, and we were very good friends, Ad Reinhardt.
Uh-huh.
I can't think of anyone he didn't talk to, quite frankly. I mean, it was really, and especially back in the day, well, Joan, you remember, I mean, everybody was always, you know,
Fighting and,
everybody was all
Everybody knew
together.
everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody,
Right.
yeah, they were all, you know, I mean, not everybody was best friends with everybody, but I mean, it was like a club, you know, and they would all, you know, I found some old, I should have brought them, I found some old issues of It Is, that old magazine, that artist magazine,
Yeah.
which was, you know, has a lot of
Pavillas.
pictures.
yeah.
Right, it is.
Yeah, it was Pavillas, exactly. So, I don't think there was, certainly, Ad and Bob, he had a lots of correspondence with Bob Motherwell, Alfred Wilkie. I mean, is there anyone,
I know.
Jack Youngerman was around.
sure,
Yeah.
sure. Jack,
Doug
Doug,
Doug
Yeah.
Wilson.
Kyle Morris, it's all, I mean, they were all just of a crew.
Yeah, it's, people have often suggested a relationship with the work of Rothko. And yeah, it started, but it's much different, much different. And to say that is kind of missing the point of Ray's work.
And of Roscoe's.
And
Yes.
of Rothko's
Yeah.
too, yeah. I think broadly, Ray is really a foremost force in the move from abstract expressionism, retaining certain qualities of it, but moving into a more clarified kind of art. Because into broader shapes, clearer, more easily defined, because by the late 50s, and even, this is very interesting, you can actually really pinpoint this to the year after Pollock's death, when an artist really began to turn to more clarified, broader shapes. People like Alex Katz really began to turn into figurative art, which is, of course, a much clearer way of the image is clear, it's there. And that's what moves into then the pure 60s art, hard edge art. So Yeah.
Did you have a relationship with Ellsworth Kelly?
I don't know.
I don't
I
know.
don't know.
You can see there's a,
Yeah, did see,
they're
yeah.
away from the hard edge.
It's,
Right, that would be the difference.
that's a good call, yeah.
It's a good call. The hard edge is the difference.
It becomes, you hate to call somebody transitional, but it brings a big part of that link of which we think of, well, there's ABEX and we jump into minimalism, but it's not that quite precise and definite. There's a move into a more volumetric kind of art. Daphne, you had a question?
I did. More about travel. You were saying there was a lot of back and forth between the studio in the city and the studio on the East End, and I was just wondering if he traveled or you as a family also traveled elsewhere, and he was pulling inspiration from other places as well.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, when we were young, Kate was 5 and I was 3, was our first family trip. We went to Europe, that we see the Guggenheim.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
we traveled all over Europe. And I remember this oddly, because I was only 3, I remember this quite well. I think the reason is because it was so very different, and some of it was hard, because, little
Yes.
ways of walking through museums
Yes.
for hours.
And mom often talked about, you had a funny accent, and she said that you were walking through, I don't remember which one, you looked up at mom and you said, "Peace, mom. No more museums." Because, I mean, we were, yeah.
Well, we're good, Mom. I mean, we remember the rings, they had the rings on the merry-go-round.
Yeah,
And they had the
yeah.
ice creams with the, as little kids, we remember the unusual things in Europe that they didn't have in America that were kid-focused. But I also remember I used to think I was dreams of standing on the edge of a big, huge building. It was very big and it was round, and I thought it was like a nightmare from at night. It turned out it was dawn, it was early, it was the Coliseum, and I was 3 years old with my family. And it was an actual, I always thought it was a dream, but it was an actual thing that happened. And Dad, we traveled to almost how many European trips. It was amazing. Joan Mitchell, I remember Mom, and she'd come over and visit us when we were in France. And
What year was that?
this is 1967.
68.
Yeah,
67, yeah.
yes. No, it was 68 because there's another memory.
Oh, right, the riots.
Maybe it's that Mom told us these stories, I can't.
No,
But Dad had that can of Spam, and we were in Paris, and it was during the student riots of 1968.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we got
happened
stuck
to
in our
be
hotel.
In a hotel, and we were looking out the window, and there were the tear gas was being thrown, and the students were running back and forth, and the gendarmes were chasing them, and then they run the other way,
Oh,
and then the
unbelievable.
students would be chasing the gendarme, and then my mother said at one point, "Ray, oh my goodness, the students had jumped on this one policeman, and they were all over him, and Mom was like, oh my God, they're gonna kill him, and they jumped off, and he was naked."
That's right, there was tear gas.
Yes.
And I remember there was in the hotel, and Caroline said, "Oh, Mom, no more ice play."
No more.
No more ice play.
Dad had a can of Spam. It was the only food. My mom had said when she
Ray,
was
why
telling
are you
the story,
bringing a can of
Why are you
Spam to
packing
Paris?
a can of Spam.
And he said, "Well, you never know." And it was right. We ended up
That's what we
staying
did.
stuck in a hotel eating Spam for dinner.
Yes, because our babysitter had said,
Don't
told
go out.
Mom, don't go out. Don't leave.
Yeah, she was a
Don't.
student, and she said, "Don't leave the hotel."
Yeah, I was there in 68.
Were you?
Were you?
Yeah. I wasn't eating Spam. Did you eat
You were
Spam?
pretty close off the policeman.
But I think that looking back on it, Dad, of course, was in the war. that can of spam. I mean, this is someone who had lived through and was in the Normandy invasion. And World War II,
Yeah.
you know, when 68 comes along.
He was
and
Sparks.
in
He
Europe,
was the radio operator on
Oh,
a,
really?
yeah,
Yes, he was on a ship in the Normandy invasion.
yeah.
Huh.
In fact, he taught me how to say my name in Morse code, and I can't remember now.
Well, if there are not any more questions, we could go on for quite a while.
Good.
Anybody else, question,
I can
comment?
tell you a small Ray Parker story when he was a student. He would stand,
Tell us your name.
I'm Gary Brandon. First of all, I do landscape architecture. And Ray Parker is very influential in landscape architecture. You can see that.
Really?
Yes, I mean, when I studied in Britain, people knew Ray Parker's painting. Just color schemes that, you know, it's at the heart of coloring and landscape architecture, parks, and things like that. It's just an intuitive thing that he had. Maybe it had something to do with traveling. The second thing is that Alfred Ryder was the currency in that department.
Albert Pinker?
I mean, Ryder.
Ryder?
Yes, everyone in the Hunter College Art Department grew with Ryder. So your observation is very potent.
Well, I tell you how
I mean, he's the basis of everybody's thinking.
that was, what year was that?
This is 62.
Really? 62.
And my story is simple. Ray, as a stunner, would stand up and, you know, it was like a barn at the college. So he had this big canvas in the back. In front of dozens of things. Everybody has the little stalls and stuff like that. Ray would take his class and with a pencil or with a pointer would stand backwards and draw a perfect circle without looking. And then he would move over a step and drew a circle over the next circle, and they were identical.
Boy,
I never heard that ever.
boy, keep on going.
The rest of this stuff the daughter
That's a
did.
great
So,
story.
I mean, Ray was, as far as for students, I mean, all of them were. I mean, you hit a word. They were generous men.
Yeah.
Generous beyond belief. Maybe the war had to do with it, because a lot of them in that department went through the war. You know, and they went to school with scholarships from the war. But there's a spirit and a quietness, you know, I don't know when, you know, right, but many of the artists in that department started families very late.
I taught it under from about 1988 on. And there was a real spirit there,
Well, I mean,
and
Philip Goosens and all of these people, that he was a soldier too, so there was a gentleman's handling and a view of proportion about people that it was in no other place and no other time. I mean, at least in this country, I mean, you had all kinds of odd things. I had to see the bar, which everybody was at, stuff like that. They were good fun, obviously. Drinking was the only thing we knew to do, so. But they were very generous and open for students too. They were more than, I mean, their idea is that you had to be something or become something before you could paint something.
that's interesting.
I mean, you just, otherwise it's, you know, little girls from Scarsdale paintings. Making private paintings and stuff
I
like
grew
that.
up in Scarsdale.
Well, you know the feel of it. Family from Scarsdale now, so.
Well, I also see you understand who the greatest living ball player is.
He was, and is.
He still is.
I take this out every October. He is.
Would you stay a while after? I'd like to talk to you. But
Sure.
ladies, how about
Thank
you?
you.
Thank you.
Wonderful.